The evening was crisp with the unmistakable scent of autumn in the air. The school grounds were alive with the hum of excitement, the golden light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the campus. Parents, kids, and teachers were gathered in groups, chatting and laughing, some standing in clusters near the school auditorium, others sitting on the grass, awaiting the start of the annual school play. The air was thick with anticipation. Tonight was a special night. For many of the children, including Zara, it was their first performance. Maya stood at the edge of the crowd, watching her daughter from a distance. Zara was standing near the stage door with her classmates, her wide eyes bright with excitement, her costume, a sparkling princess dress, billowing gently in the cool breeze. Maya felt her chest swell with pride, her heart fluttering as she watched her daughter chat with her friends, practicing her lines under her breath. The atmosphere was light, cheerful, and full of warmth. A perfect fall evening. Everything felt right. For a moment, the outside world, with its worries and chaos, seemed far away. The leaves danced gently from the trees, children laughed, and the faint sound of a piano being tuned in the auditorium hummed softly in the background. Maya smiled to herself, thinking how lucky she was. This was the kind of evening that made the stress of everyday life worth it. She took a deep breath, the air crisp against her skin, and shifted her gaze back to Zara. Her daughter was holding her arms out, twirling around in circles, practicing the movements for the dance number in the play. Maya's eyes softened, her heart full, watching her daughter's carefree joy. This moment, this piece, was everything she had hoped for when she decided to put her daughter in the play. But then, something shifted. In the corner of her eye, Maya caught sight of a figure standing just outside the crowd, near the entrance to the auditorium. Victoria. At first, Maya didn't think much of it. Victoria was one of the more prominent members of the Homeowners Association, always showing up at meetings, keeping an eye on things, making sure everyone followed the rules. But tonight, there was something off. Victoria stood with her arms crossed, her gaze cold, scanning the crowd like a hawk searching for prey. She seemed out of place, though Maya couldn't put her finger on why. Victoria wasn't part of the normal group of parents who gathered to watch the play. She didn't smile, didn't mingle, didn't laugh. Instead, she stood slightly apart from the others, her eyes flicking from person to person, then pausing briefly on Zara. Maya frowned, but only for a second. She dismissed it. Victoria was just another uptight HOA member, no different from the other overly concerned parents who felt the need to monitor every aspect of their neighborhood. She looked back at Zara, but her eyes kept drifting back to Victoria, who seemed to linger a little too long on the children, especially on Zara, who had now joined her classmates near the stage. Maya felt a strange, fleeting discomfort stir in her chest, but she tried to ignore it. She was here to enjoy the evening, not to dwell on one person's strange behavior. As the lights in the auditorium dimmed, signaling the start of the play, Maya took a final glance at Victoria. There was something about the way Victoria was watching Zara, something that made Maya's stomach tighten. But then the music began, and the children flooded onto the stage. The play had started. The excitement in the air thickened, and Maya felt a rush of joy, pushing the uneasy feeling aside. The play had begun, and for the moment, everything felt right. The audience erupted into applause as Zara stepped into the spotlight, beaming with pride. Maya couldn't take her eyes off her daughter, who was shining brighter than the stage lights. But in the back of her mind, a small seed of doubt began to grow, fueled by the way Victoria had watched her daughter. Something was coming, something that would change everything. But for now, Maya chose to focus on the joy in front of her, the laughter, the music, and the light. She would savor the moment before the storm broke. The auditorium was alive with energy as the lights dimmed, and the familiar hum of excited chatter faded into the background. The stage lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the children in their costumes, their faces beaming with the anticipation of their first big performance. Zara stood backstage with her classmates, waiting for her cue, her heart pounding with excitement. Maya couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as she watched her daughter, dressed in her sparkling princess costume, anxiously adjusting the headpiece. She was a vision of grace and excitement, ready to take the stage. The play began with the opening notes of a cheerful song, and the children filed onto the stage, their voices rising in harmony as they began their performance. Zara stepped forward, her small role as a fairy tale character filling her with joy. She was the one who would bring the sparkle to the show, and Maya watched her every move, mesmerized by her daughter's enthusiasm. The crowd cheered, parents clapped, and there was a sense of magic in the air as the play unfolded flawlessly. But amidst the warmth of the moment, Maya couldn't shake the sense that something was off. Her gaze drifted from the stage to the audience, and there she saw Victoria again. Standing on the far side of the room, Victoria was fidgeting in her seat, her posture tense. At first, Maya thought nothing of it. Perhaps Victoria was just uncomfortable, or maybe she was as nervous as the kids on stage. But as the play continued, Maya couldn't ignore the growing unease in her chest. Victoria stood up, adjusting her position as though she couldn't settle, glancing once again at Zara, her gaze narrowed, suspicious. Maya felt a flicker of discomfort, wondering why Victoria seemed so fixated on her daughter. Was it just an overprotective tendency, or was something else at play? Victoria shifted from foot to foot, and her eyes darted between Zara and the other children, lingering a little too long on Zara as she performed. The feeling grew stronger. Maya couldn't tear her eyes away from Victoria, who now had her arms crossed tightly across her chest, her lips pressed into a thin line. Maya's instinct told her something was wrong, but she couldn't quite pinpoint it. Why was Victoria so uncomfortable? Why was she watching Zara so intently, as if she were searching for something? As the play went on, Victoria leaned toward a fellow parent sitting beside her, her lips moving quickly as she whispered something inaudible. Maya tried to make out the words but couldn't hear over the sound of applause. But the way Victoria's tone rose, sharp, critical, left Maya feeling uneasy. Was she criticizing the children's performance? Was she upset with the way things were going? Or was her attention still solely on Zara? The whispering continued, her body language tense, her eyes fixed on Zara. Maya tried to refocus on her daughter, but she couldn't shake the nagging feeling. There was a palpable tension in Victoria's demeanor that was difficult to ignore. Maya's heart beat faster as she observed Victoria's increasingly agitated behavior. It was like the woman was waiting for something to happen, and the longer Victoria watched Zara, the more Maya felt a sense of dread creeping into her chest. By now, Zara had finished her first scene, her face glowing with excitement and pride. She waved at the crowd, her sparkling costume shimmering under the lights. The applause was thunderous, but as the audience cheered, Victoria remained standing, her eyes still locked on Zara, as though she were looking for some kind of flaw, some sign of something wrong. Maya shook her head, trying to push the thoughts aside. It had to be nothing. Victoria was probably just nervous or uncomfortable with the crowd. Still, as she watched Victoria retreat back to her seat, her gaze lingering on Zara, Maya couldn't help but feel a chill running down her spine. Something about Victoria's behavior didn't sit right. And as the performance continued, the question lingered in the air: what was it that Victoria saw in Zara that made her so uneasy? The school play was in full swing now, the energy in the auditorium palpable. The children on stage were performing their hearts out, and the audience was completely absorbed in the spectacle. Maya couldn't help but beam with pride as she watched Zara, her daughter, beaming with joy under the spotlight. The applause was loud, the audience clapping in rhythm with the music, and the whole scene felt magical. But then, without warning, the quiet hum of the crowd was shattered. From across the room, Victoria shot to her feet, her hands shaking as she thrust them into the air. Her voice, high-pitched and sharp, cut through the moment like a knife. "What is she doing?" she shouted, her words echoing throughout the auditorium. Maya froze, her heart thudding in her chest. She turned toward Victoria, her stomach sinking as the entire room fell into stunned silence. Every eye turned toward Victoria, the room still except for the faint sound of the play in the background, now muffled by the awkward tension in the air. Victoria was standing near the aisle, her face flushed with anger. Her eyes were wide, locked onto Zara, who had just finished her part on stage. "That little girl," Victoria continued, her voice now shrill, "she's suspicious. There's something wrong with her. She doesn't belong here." Maya felt a jolt of shock run through her. She immediately stood up from her seat, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Victoria, please," she began, her voice strained, trying to defuse the situation. But Victoria was relentless. Her face twisted with frustration as she ignored Maya and kept yelling. "Do you see that?" she demanded, her hands waving toward Zara, who had frozen in place, confusion flashing across her young face. "She's got that nervous energy. She's up to something. Why isn't anyone seeing it? Why isn't anyone stopping her?" The entire auditorium had gone silent, but the tension was thick, suffocating. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd as the parents exchanged confused glances. Victoria's accusations were so bizarre, so out of nowhere, that no one seemed to know how to react. Maya's mind raced. She took a step forward, her voice shaking but firm. "Victoria, you need to calm down," she urged, her eyes pleading. "There's nothing wrong with Zara. She's just a child performing in a play. Please, let's just sit down and let the show continue." But Victoria wasn't listening. Her hands were trembling now, her eyes darting between Zara and the parents in the rows around her. "You all are blind. Don't you see? She's dangerous. I've seen it before. I've seen it in her eyes. This isn't normal. She's not who she appears to be." Victoria's words grew more frantic with every passing second. Her face was flushed with a mixture of fear and outrage, her breath shallow as if the weight of her own delusions were taking over. Maya felt her own heart racing now, the pit in her stomach deepening. What was happening? Why was Victoria acting like this? It didn't make sense. She could feel her face flush with embarrassment, the eyes of every person in the auditorium now on her, waiting for her to calm the situation down. But then, as if to escalate the situation further, Victoria moved toward the stage. She began pushing past the other parents, blocking their view of the children on stage, her eyes fixed solely on Zara. "She's dangerous," she shouted again, her voice now frantic, hoarse with urgency. "She's part of something bigger. You don't understand, but you will. She has to be stopped." The principal, Mr. Alvarez, was the first to act. He rushed to Victoria's side, attempting to physically move her away from the stage, his face filled with a mix of confusion and concern. "Victoria, you need to leave. This isn't the time for this," he said firmly, but his voice was drowned out by Victoria's wild ranting. Maya stood frozen, her thoughts swirling. What was this? Was this really happening? Victoria's behavior didn't just seem erratic, it seemed dangerous. Her mind struggled to comprehend the words coming from Victoria's mouth, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeply troubling was unfolding in front of her. Mr. Alvarez finally managed to get a hold of Victoria, trying to pull her away from the stage, but Victoria resisted, her hands still flailing, her accusations getting louder. "You'll see. You'll all see," she screamed, her voice cracking. Maya's heart raced, a mixture of disbelief and fear running through her. Victoria wasn't just upset, she was unraveling, spiraling into some kind of frenzy. Maya stepped forward again, her voice pleading with Victoria, "This isn't who you are. You have to stop," but Victoria wasn't listening. She wasn't listening to anyone. Her eyes were wide, filled with panic, as if she were fighting against some invisible force. It wasn't just the chaos of the play that had rattled her, it was something deeper, something that Maya didn't understand but could feel in the pit of her stomach. The principal and two teachers were now trying to restrain Victoria, but she was stronger than she appeared, her voice growing louder with every struggle. Maya felt the eyes of the entire auditorium on her, felt the confusion, the unease, the growing fear among the parents. She had to act. She had to stop Victoria before this got any worse. But in that moment, Maya couldn't help but wonder, what had really set off Victoria? What had made her see something in Zara that wasn't there? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as Victoria continued to scream, and Maya realized with horror that things were about to spiral out of control in ways no one could have predicted. The moment Victoria erupted, the entire auditorium seemed to freeze. Her voice, high-pitched and frantic, had cut through the air, drowning out the music and laughter of the play. Parents turned in their seats, confused and alarmed, their eyes searching for the source of the disruption. Maya had stepped forward, trying to reason with Victoria, but the chaos was rapidly escalating. The tension in the air had become thick, suffocating, and Maya felt the weight of it pressing against her chest. And then, in a split second, it happened. Victoria's arm shot out toward the stage, her eyes wide with fear and panic. Without warning, she pulled something from her jacket, a glint of metal caught in the light. Maya's heart stopped. The crowd was still in shock, trying to process what was happening, but in that moment, everything seemed to slow down. Victoria wasn't just shouting now, she was holding a gun. "Maya, watch out," someone screamed, but it was too late. The sound of the gunshot rang out, a sharp crack that reverberated through the walls, louder than anything else. For a brief moment, the entire room seemed to go deaf. It was as if time itself had stopped. Maya felt the world tilt beneath her feet as the sound echoed in her ears, and everything else fell away. Zara, her daughter, her baby girl, had been right there, a few steps away from Victoria, standing frozen on stage. The shot was close. Too close. The entire auditorium fell into stunned silence. Then, as the gunshot's echo faded into the background, a sickening realization took over. Zara crumpled to the ground. "Mom!" Zara screamed, her voice raw with terror, but as Maya looked down, she saw the little girl shaking, her knees buckling beneath her, but, miraculously, unharmed. She had fallen to the ground, fear gripping her tightly, but no blood. No wound. But the panic was instant. The air was filled with screams, a chorus of pure terror. People were jumping from their seats, pushing each other in a frantic attempt to flee. Maya barely registered the chaos unfolding around her. All she could focus on was her daughter, on Zara, and the frantic, overwhelming need to protect her. "Zara!" Maya screamed, pushing past the crowd, her legs shaking as she ran toward her daughter. She reached her just as Zara started to lift her head, tears streaming down her face, eyes wide and full of fear. The girl was trembling, her body pressed to the floor, still unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. "Mom, she shot." Zara gasped, her voice choked with sobs. Her hands were shaking as she tried to crawl into Maya's arms, looking up at her mother with wide, panicked eyes. "Shoo, you're okay. You're okay, sweetheart," Maya whispered urgently, her hands trembling as she helped pull Zara up into her arms, cradling her as tightly as she could. "It's okay. We're okay." But even as she said the words, Maya could feel the cold grip of fear tightening around her heart. Around them, the chaos was only beginning. Teachers and parents were scrambling to help, shouting for each other to stay down, to stay safe. The principal, Mr. Thompson, was already moving towards Victoria, who had backed herself into a corner near the side of the stage, still clutching the gun, her body shaking with raw, manic energy. Her mouth moved rapidly, her words barely intelligible, but Maya could hear snippets of her ranting. "She's dangerous. You all don't see it. She's possessed. She'll hurt us all." Victoria's voice was high-pitched and frantic, the words tumbling out in a rush. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, almost wild, and there was a tremble in her hands as she gripped the gun tighter. The fear in her eyes was consuming, but it was twisted, delusional. Maya pulled Zara closer, her hands shaking as she tried to comfort her daughter. Her eyes stayed locked on Victoria, but she couldn't tear her focus away from Zara, her daughter, who was still shivering in her arms. "What did she do to us?" Zara whispered, her voice breaking. The room was a flurry of activity now, as teachers and parents tried to reach Victoria, who was still screaming her accusations. Mr. Thompson reached her first, trying to keep her calm, trying to gently take the gun from her hands. But Victoria's manic energy was overwhelming, and she jerked back, pulling away from his grasp. "You can't take her away from me. She's not who she says she is," Victoria cried, her voice raw and frantic. "You all have to listen to me." Maya's head spun. She couldn't process what was happening. She had never seen Victoria act like this frantic, paranoid version of herself. She had always been the rule keeper, the HOA president who did things by the book. And yet, here she was, a woman completely unraveling, convinced that a young girl was a threat to everyone in the room. Zara buried her face in Maya's shoulder, still trembling with fear, unable to fully understand why Victoria had done what she did. Maya was numb, her thoughts racing but not connecting. It was hard to process the sheer reality of the moment, that someone she had known as a neighbor, a person who had seemed so normal, had almost taken her daughter's life. And as Victoria continued to scream, her voice fading into the chaos around them, Maya realized with a sickening certainty that this wasn't just about a misplaced fear. This was a woman so consumed by her delusions that she could justify violence in the name of protection from something that didn't exist. "Zara. I'm so sorry," Maya whispered, squeezing her daughter even tighter. "But we're safe. We're safe." The room seemed to close in around them as the gunshot's echo still reverberated in Maya's mind. The shock hadn't worn off. The horror of it all was too much, and it was only then that Maya realized, the real battle wasn't just about keeping her daughter safe. It was about surviving the nightmare that Victoria had created, a nightmare that had just begun. The chaotic energy from the auditorium had spilled out into the schoolyard, where police cars were now parked in every available space. Red and blue lights spun, reflecting off the windows of the school building and casting an eerie glow over the crowd of parents, teachers, and students who had gathered in small groups, murmuring in shock. The distant sounds of sirens still rang in Maya's ears as she stood near the school's entrance, holding tightly onto Zara, whose small body trembled in her arms. Despite the fact that her daughter was physically unharmed, Maya could feel the weight of the trauma pressing down on her. Her heart still raced with fear, the images of Victoria holding the gun, her eyes wild and filled with delusion, playing over and over in her mind. The sound of the gunshot still reverberated in her ears, a constant reminder that, for a moment, her life, their lives, had been in danger. The police officers, moving methodically and carefully, had already started to question the witnesses. Maya and Zara were among the first to be pulled aside, their statements taken one by one. Maya's words came out in a rushed, frantic jumble, the terror of the evening clouding her thoughts. She tried to piece together what had happened, but her mind kept drifting back to Victoria, who had been led away in handcuffs, still ranting and raving, her delusions consuming her every word. "How's she doing?" one of the officers asked Maya, his voice gentle as he tried to assess Zara's condition. Maya forced a smile, trying to reassure him, but the look of fear in her daughter's eyes tore at her. Zara had barely said a word since the incident, her eyes wide, her hands still shaking. She was physically fine, but emotionally, it was clear she wasn't. "She's scared," Maya said quietly, wiping a tear from Zara's cheek. "But she's okay. Just shaken." The officer nodded, writing something in his notebook before glancing at Zara one last time. He moved on, leaving Maya and Zara alone for a moment, giving them space while the investigation continued around them. Maya took a deep breath and sat down on the nearby bench with Zara, trying to comfort her. The noise of the crowd faded as she wrapped her arms around Zara, feeling the weight of the situation settle on her. She couldn't fathom what had just happened, what had made Victoria snap. The officers' interviews with other parents and teachers had begun to reveal more about Victoria's unsettling behavior over the past few months. Some parents spoke about strange interactions with her at neighborhood meetings, others recalled her suspicious comments about certain families, even Maya's own. "She's always watching people," one parent had said. "You can't help but feel like she's judging you. It's like she thinks everyone is up to something." Maya's stomach churned as she overheard snippets of these conversations. Victoria had always been a stickler for rules, obsessed with maintaining order in the community, but Maya had never suspected that it ran this deep, that Victoria had become so consumed by paranoia that it had destroyed her sense of reality. As the investigation moved forward, Maya discovered that Victoria had been compiling lists of residents and students she deemed suspicious. The HOA meetings, the complaints, the accusations, they were all part of a pattern that Victoria had been building in her mind, one that had culminated in her violent outburst at the school play. Maya had learned that Victoria had been keeping tabs on the children at the school, convinced that there was a hidden threat, a threat she thought only she could see. The more Maya learned, the clearer it became, Victoria wasn't just upset about the play, or about the way Zara had looked. She had been living in a world of delusion, one that was increasingly divorced from reality. Her obsession with the HOA, with controlling the neighborhood, had morphed into something far more sinister. She had let her fear take control of her mind, and in doing so, had created a false narrative where the children, especially Zara, were threats that needed to be stopped. Maya felt a wave of disgust wash over her. It was difficult to imagine how someone could twist their perceptions so violently. Victoria wasn't just a neighbor who had lost control of a situation. She had become a prisoner of her own mind. And Maya knew that nothing would ever be the same again. As the night wore on, the police continued their investigation, and Maya was left to process the truth about Victoria. The woman who had almost killed her daughter, the woman who had put an entire school community at risk, wasn't just a villain. She was a victim of her own fears, her own inability to see the truth. The realization was horrifying. Maya's hand gripped Zara's tightly. The fear still gripped her heart, but she knew one thing for certain: she would protect Zara from anyone who tried to make her feel like she didn't belong, like she was dangerous. No one would ever take her safety for granted again. The investigation into Victoria was far from over, but Maya knew one thing: Victoria had already lost. And in the wake of it all, Maya and Zara were left to rebuild their lives, knowing that they had survived the storm, but not untouched by it. The cold, sterile room hummed with the faint buzzing of overhead lights. Maya sat across from the table, her hands folded in front of her, palms sweaty and her heart racing. Across from her, Victoria sat silently, her back straight, her face blank, yet her eyes darted nervously to the door every few seconds. Despite the harsh fluorescent lighting, Victoria's face remained calm, almost detached. It was surreal, after everything that had happened, after Victoria had pulled that gun and nearly killed Zara, now here they were. Maya felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on her chest. How had it come to this? The door clicked open, and Officer Harris stepped in, his presence like an anchor in the room. He glanced at Maya with a quiet nod, then turned to Victoria, his voice firm but respectful. "You know why you're here, Victoria," he said, his tone neutral. Victoria's eyes flicked to him, but she didn't speak, as if she were waiting for something. "For Maya perhaps?" "I want to talk to her," Maya said suddenly, her voice low but resolute. Officer Harris hesitated, then nodded and left, closing the door behind him. The room felt even smaller now, the air heavier. Maya looked at Victoria, the woman who had been a fixture in her life, in their community, someone she had always assumed was just another rigid, controlling neighbor. But Victoria was so much more than that now. She was a person driven to madness by fear, a fear that nearly destroyed her daughter's life. Victoria shifted in her seat but remained silent, waiting for Maya to speak first. "You tried to kill my daughter," Maya said, her voice trembling, but she forced herself to meet Victoria's eyes. And you still don't understand why that's wrong? For a moment, Victoria just stared at her. There was a strange emptiness in her gaze, a calmness that didn't match the chaos she had caused. Then, slowly, she nodded, her lips pulling into a tight, controlled line. I did what needed to be done, Victoria replied, her voice steady, almost matter-of-fact. I knew something was wrong with her. I could see it. You couldn't, but I could. She was a threat, and no one else was paying attention. I was protecting all of you from her. Maya felt her heart constrict. You're telling me, she said, her words slow and deliberate, that you thought Zara, my 10-year-old daughter, was dangerous? That you needed to kill her to protect us all? Victoria shifted again in her seat, but her eyes didn't leave Maya. Yes, she said quietly. She wasn't just a child. She was something else. I could see it. The way she looked at people, the way she moved. It wasn't right. She was playing all of you, using her innocence to get close to you. To all of you. The cold disbelief in Maya's chest tightened into something harder. She couldn't fathom what she was hearing. You thought she was a demon? A vampire? Because of a Halloween costume? Victoria's eyes sharpened, and her voice grew quieter, more intense. It wasn't just the costume, she said, her voice breaking the tension in the air like a crack in glass. It was everything. The way how she infiltrated everything. People didn't see it, but I saw it. You were all blind. Maya felt the surge of anger bubble up from deep within her. How could you justify that? How could you justify trying to kill my daughter? Victoria didn't flinch. Her lips parted in a tight, brittle smile. I wasn't killing her. I was saving everyone. You just don't understand. None of you do. She's not what she appears to be. Her voice cracked on the last words, and Maya caught a glimpse of something else, the desperation, the madness hiding behind Victoria's tightly controlled expression. For the first time, Maya saw the cracks in Victoria's delusions, the unraveling of someone who had buried herself too deep in her own fantasy. I've been trying to protect everyone, Victoria continued, her voice more distant now. From what's coming. You all won't see it yet. But when it comes, you'll all realize I was right. I had to act before it was too late. Maya took a slow, shuddering breath. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. The pieces were coming together, but they didn't make sense. Victoria hadn't been just some angry, overzealous neighbor. She had been consumed by an idea, an obsession that had spiraled completely out of control. You're not protecting anyone, Maya said, her voice firm now. You've destroyed your own life. You've almost destroyed mine. You can't justify your actions by blaming everyone else. You were the one who broke. Victoria's face twitched. For the briefest moment, Maya saw the raw panic behind her eyes. Victoria seemed to shrink in on herself, the bravado fading. But in the next second, the mask returned. I was just trying to save everyone, Victoria said, her voice hoarse. I was trying to stop the evil before it spread. You'll see. You'll all see what I mean. The finality in Victoria's voice made Maya shiver. There was no remorse. No guilt. Just conviction, as if she truly believed that she had been in the right, that her delusions were not only justified but necessary. Maya stood up slowly, her hand gripping the edge of the table. I don't think I'll ever understand you, she said quietly, her voice a whisper that echoed with disbelief. But I hope you get the help you need, Victoria. Because if this is what you think is saving us, I'm terrified of what you'll do next. Victoria didn't respond. She simply stared at Maya, her eyes still wild, her mind still lost in the delusions she had created. As Maya turned and walked toward the door, her heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread settling deep within her. Victoria wasn't just a neighbor who had snapped, she was a person consumed by something much darker, and it had almost cost Maya everything. Maya stepped out of the room, the door closing quietly behind her. The investigation was far from over, but Maya couldn't help but wonder, was Victoria the only one? Or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered? The days following the incident were a blur of police reports, interviews, and counseling sessions. The world that had once been so familiar now felt distant, as though the events of that night had cast a permanent shadow over everything Maya and Zara once knew. Every moment was tinged with the remnants of fear, the sound of a car backfiring, the distant echo of a door slamming, the sudden rustle of paper. All these sounds pulled them back to that auditorium, to the fear and chaos that had torn through their lives. Zara had become quieter, more withdrawn. She no longer ran to her friends after school, and her bright spark seemed dimmed by the memories that lingered. Maya had tried to reassure her, to protect her from the aftermath of the trauma, but Zara was a child who had experienced something no one should ever go through. Despite her mother's best efforts, Zara was haunted by that night. At night, Maya would sit in the dim light of her living room, watching Zara sleep peacefully, her face serene in the soft glow of the moon. But Maya knew better than to think everything was okay. The strain was visible in the tightness of Zara's shoulders, the way her eyes darted nervously when someone raised their voice. The fear wasn't just in the memories of that night, it had become a part of them both, embedded in their bones. The neighbors, too, were shaken. Whispers spread like wildfire through the streets, people in the community trying to make sense of the events, trying to understand how Victoria had gone from a seemingly upstanding member of their HOA to a woman who had nearly taken a child's life. It left everyone reeling, no one was safe, no one could be trusted. The thought that someone they'd known for years could harbor such delusions was unsettling. The PTA held a meeting at the local community center, where every parent was invited to discuss the fallout of the incident and address safety concerns. Maya had been hesitant to go at first, unsure of what they would say, but she knew it was important. The event had shaken everyone to their core. Parents talked about installing more security measures at school, about the need to be vigilant and aware of the signs of mental illness. No one spoke Victoria's name directly, but the silence in the room was filled with her presence. Everyone wanted to understand how such a tragedy could have happened on their doorstep. The meeting ended with no real answers, just questions that would never be fully answered. The community was scarred, fractured, and no one knew how to heal the wounds that had been opened. But through it all, Maya realized something. She was not the same person who had walked into that meeting room hours before. Zara had survived. They both had. And that was something no one, not even Victoria, could take from them. In the quiet moments, Maya would look at her daughter and see a glimpse of the girl who had danced around the living room, carefree and full of laughter. That girl was still there, beneath the weight of the trauma. Zara would heal. It would take time, but Maya was determined to help her find her way back. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. The shadows of that night would always linger, but Maya knew that as long as they had each other, they would move forward. With every small step, they would rebuild, slowly and cautiously, like a house that had been torn down but was slowly being pieced together, brick by brick. And though they would never forget what happened, Maya realized that they were stronger for having lived through it. Together, they would move forward, carrying the weight of that night, but finding strength in the knowledge that they had survived, and that, in the end, was all that truly mattered.